Okay, I'll admit, my first review was a little harsh. The first episode didn't ruin the concept per se, I just thought that it didn't do it as good as most people thought it did. But when I first watched that episode, even though there were multiple aspects of it that stuck out like a sore thumb, I still thought it had potential. I was genuinely hooked. Then I watched the second episode.
Spaceship Pilot. Origin story.
Of course. Precocious, popular, supernatural understanding of doors takes after her old man.
Bite me! Kinda cringe.
Ew, yeah, oh, give me a minute.
It's not terrible, but it's not that good. The episode begins with a flashback of N's past. In this flashback, N isn't a ruthless disassembly drone, he's just a simple servant to the humans. Interesting, I really want to see how these humans are living. Murder Drones is set in the year 3071, and although this is a flashback, it isn't that far back in the past. I wonder what futuristic technologies the humans have right now. They're living in a mansion. Yeah. N bumps into V, who, instead of being a psychopath, is basically one step away from those girls in anime that gasp over meaningless things just to make them seem, I don't know, quirky, attractive.
Looking.
Well, scratch that. She is one of them. And then J is, well, J, but more annoying. She gets caught being a bully and tries to suck up to Tessa, our first named human character. Tessa is apparently adding a new Smash character to the roster / maid crew, whatever you want to call it. You know, I gotta say, this scene genuinely kind of intimidated me. Tessa actually looked even more intimidating than Jay did in episode 1. What a good villain she's going to make, I thought to myself. This is one of the reasons I hate episode 5. But that's the end of the flashback, and it's unclear if N remembers that or if it's just information given to we the audience. In the present moment, Uzi is inspecting the pod that the disassembly drones went to Copper 9 in for clues. She looks into a mirror, her eye turns into this symbol thing, and she gets 7 years of bad luck. V apparently doesn't know anything about this. Oh yeah, V is just chained up by one pretty weak chain. Her weapons have not been removed, and the disassembly drones are known to be able to cut through metal easily. I wonder how this will end. So what has Uzi found? Well, turns out that N was the pilot of this pod, and it's revealed to us exactly like this.
What'd you find?
Did you know that was a pilot hack?
I was the pilot? That's awesome! I crashed and ruined everything. Spaceship Pilot. Origin story.
What am I supposed to feel here? N questions the morality of Uzi's murder all humans plan, and Uzi points out the disassembly drone's memory problem and that they had no way of contacting the humans. N retaliates by saying that since Jay was clearly getting orders from someone, was she though? That this means there's a chance the drones weren't necessarily sent by the humans. This upsets Uzi. Back in the bunker, which I guess isn't needed anymore, some maintenance worker trying to fix the hole in the ceiling that N made flying out last episode gets killed by a thing. Khan is having a parent-teacher conference with Uzi's teacher, who is played by the creator of the show, interestingly. Anyways, this teacher suggests that Uzi may be mentally challenged.
Yeah, she has trouble fitting in. We think there might be something damaged with her programming.
Speaking of Uzi, she forgot a railgun, so Thad brings it back for her. And he tells her and N that Jay's corpse has disappeared, and there have been some spooky disappearances. Uzi and N agree that this warrants a return to the bunker. The guard lets them in because N drew this artistic masterpiece. Oh yeah, that thing that killed the maintenance worker earlier? It just took another victim by luring them in with a hologram. This thing can make holograms. It's also a GLaDOS inspiration, let's say. Anyways, Uzi, N, and Thad sneak past this crime scene that actually turns out to be one of those holograms. This thing made an entire crime scene just to lure in one victim. But the victim dies a hero. She pushes Uzi's character arc just a little bit forward.
Yeah, where's Khan? Because this looks not ideal.
Parent-teacher conference? Something about his daughter being more important than building a door in this hallway. Ugh.
Okay, almost threw up.
Speaking of character arcs, Khan is starting to realize how terrible of a parent he is back at the parent-teacher conference.
I mean, you don't think it's my parenting, do you? I left her for dead once. It sounds like she's bored in your class and the other kids suck.
You know what? I think that collectively, I'm gonna add 1.
If you were watching that clip closely, you may have noticed that the GLaDOS thing, you know what? I'm gonna call it Glutus. Anyways, Glutus is trying to get into the room because it wants to kill Khan. And it's here that we're introduced to 2 new characters, Lizzie and Doll. Doll is Russian for no real reason, but she's pretty cool, for now. Lizzie, however, is anything but cool. If you thought the characters were annoying before, Lizzie is an intentionally annoying character. And I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but the show does a really good job of making me want to throw Lizzie into an oncoming train.
Where are your folks?
Мертвые. Я смотрела, как они умирали.
That was the joke, idiot. That girl is gorgeous, right? I'm gonna let her in.
But annoying characters aside, not really. The trio has found a kind of server-looking room. Uzi finds one of the server racks and just somehow knows that that specific server rack is the one that has to do with the mystery at hand. She asks En if he knows anything about this, and his answer is annoyingly vague.
Absolute solver? Reboot? Does this have something to do with how you grew your head back?
I actively avoid unpacking how that works.
So, do you know if it has anything to do with it? That doesn't mean anything. But anyways, that symbol on the server rack is the same symbol that Uzi's eye turned into earlier. And this somehow allows her to Sherlock Holmes her way into figuring out that the Absolute Solver is a backup program designed to collect more matter for disassembly drones that have been damaged beyond regeneration. But before she can explain any more of the lore to us, En cuts her off because he and Thad notice something spooky.
Matter.
I'm sorry. I can't take this seriously with not only Thad's silly little face jiggle, but those weird kind of anime eyes. I'm sorry, it's just not creepy. But I'll admit, the following few seconds feature some great cinematography. Yeah, that shot is good. So that hand thing drags Thad away, ignoring the futile efforts of En's freaking ninja star. Uzi and En recover and decide to chase Thad after making the show's 10 trillionth meta joke.
Chainsaw hand time?
Yeah, cool.
But Glutus sees this coming and makes a hologram of Thad to distract En and Uzi so that they can, eat Thad? Absorb him? Kiss him? Anyways, En and Uzi aren't buying it, so En throws another ninja star and Uzi kicks it mid-jump to send it towards the real Thad. Not that they knew where Thad actually was, not that that's how physics work, not that this scene makes any sense in any aspect. So Thad's free, but instead of fighting like in the last episode, he runs away. He does, however, thank Uzi and En, and he invites them to his shindig, and they really like that. It's enough to make them scream like one of those Instagram girls after the most basic and ordinary thing happens.
We're busy then anyway, so whatever. So lame.
As much as I want to call this thing a GLaDOS ripoff, I really can't. GLaDOS is just so much better on so many levels that to even relate this thing to GLaDOS is an insult. Anyways, Uzi mistakes this thing for some sort of J backup. Glutus corrects Uzi and shows her that really, they are trying to repair J. And they've made some progress. This thing is also somehow related to Uzi's dead mother, because what kind of loser protagonist has 2 living parents? Glutus offers to assimilate Uzi into themselves in exchange for answers, and Uzi refuses. So Glutus takes the only logical course of action and rips Khan in half. For one shot.
Whoa! Hey!
Goodbye, Dad.
Wow, that seems like a satisfying end to his character arc. I'm sure this isn't another hologram. Oh yeah, En just disappeared. He's gone. So Glutus takes advantage of Uzi's shock and lunges at her, but En reappears to save the day. Uzi's too traumatized to fight, so she hands the railgun to En. Psych! En was another hologram, so Glutus destroys the railgun. why was this ruse necessary? Uzi clearly wasn't going to attack. Glutus had her right where they wanted. So why make such a complicated ruse just to get a railgun that Uzi is too traumatized to use? So Glutus has Uzi in her grasp and is about to assimilate when N actually saves her this time. This dude disappeared, reappeared, and reappeared in the span of 1 minute. But how are they going to defeat this crazy powerful force? It's simple, really. Uzi's railgun explodes. Glutus uses some sort of backup ejection thing that N stabs to death, and it turns into like a miniature black hole, I guess. Uzi is so thankful to N that she questions his very existence. This hurts N enough to make him run back toward the pod. But he stays around just long enough for Khan to find Uzi to give him a big old HUG, and for Khan to notice N but not say anything about it. Back at the abandoned parent-teacher conference, we see Doll staring at a picture of V, and we also see a heavily damaged door to the room. This is because when Lizzie was stupid enough to try and open it, Doll secretly intervened using that same symbol from the Absolute Solver. Interesting. We see this little cockroach thing that Doll telekinetically kills and licks its blood off of her lips. Wait, lips? Never mind. N is kind of sulking at the pod, and V is annoyed that she isn't getting any attention. And surprise, surprise, her chain is broken. What did I tell you? But she is still pretending to be captured, because character development. Meanwhile, Uzi is just as confused about the lore of this show as you are. And that's the end of the episode. Yeah, I summarized it. This video might be longer than the actual episode at this point, honestly. I once heard someone say that Murder Drones was a pathetic low-effort cash grab. And as much as I think the pacing could improve, as much as I think the story could be executed much better, and as much as I think the comedy sucks, it's not. And I feel like it's pretty obvious that it's not. There is passion put into this project. Heck, sometimes there's a little too much passion put into this project. But even so, it's one of the main reasons I watch this show, despite me having to pause it every 5 minutes, just because of one too many bad jokes.
I'm not mad at you, by the way, just generally hormonal!
Or maybe I shouldn't be talking about how bad the comedy is here. Because, well, the comedy in this episode is actually kind of good. It also contains the most pathetic attempt at humor I've ever seen in my life. But other than that, there are like half a dozen decent jokes here. Some of it still follows that unoriginal formula, but it's executed in a much more clever way.
Yes, and hello, it's me, Tad. Can I get a location?
Huh?
I heard dentist's office. I'm Thad at the dentist's office. Come over here for your teeth.
This episode is also good at making you ask questions. What is Glutus? Who is Doll? And what are her motivations? What does this have to do with Uzi's mom? A lot later in the series, the show starts to become more lore dependent. And I'm not against having hidden parts of a story involved in a show, but when it's something so essential to the plot, it just feels like a dumb move to have one of your core story aspects only available to people who analyze this specific frame. I had to watch like 3 Murder Drones Analyze videos just to understand what the heck happened in episode 5. I really hate episode 5. This episode doesn't do that. It makes you ask questions that will confuse you, but in a good way. It's an interesting and important mystery, but it's not something that needs to be answered immediately to understand the stakes at hand. But other than that, I really can't think of anything this episode improves on without getting really specific. So, here comes the part where people hate me. Yay! One of the main problems that I talked about in my previous video was the characters. They were all stereotypical, and I'll admit that in this episode they start to become more fleshed out. But even the character arcs themselves feel borrowed, and the characters that don't develop just devolve. Well, I guess for Lizzie you really can't get any worse. One of the best examples of this is Thad, which is a shame. I really liked Thad. He didn't play a huge role in the first episode, but he was clearly being built up to become at least a secondary character. And I'll admit that we do see a lot more of Thad here, but he really just feels like he's along for the ride. The most useful thing he does is getting caught and leading En and Uzi to Glutus. And then, well, he runs away. I get that this thing is supposed to be a lot more powerful than the disassembly drones, even though Glutus wasn't nearly as cool as Jay, but he just invites En and Uzi to his shindig and abandons them. And we never even get to see the shindig. Come on, man. I'm only half joking about that. I genuinely felt kind of betrayed. Speaking of betrayal, remember how I said the premise was great in my first video? Yeah, that premise is essentially gone now. And by that, I don't mean that the show has completely turned around and no one feels like themselves. I just mean that some of the ideas that were introduced in episode 1 just aren't really there anymore. To be fair, this problem isn't really all there in episode 2. It just kind of gets introduced here. The first episode was about the disassembly drones being sent by a company that wants to destroy the worker drones for an unknown reason. This episode is about Glutus trying to kill the worker drones and repair Jay. It's basically an excuse to introduce some new story threads without really doing much. Now, to be fair, this may have been the plan all along, I don't know, but considering that the 2 episodes were released over a year apart from each other, I doubt it. Funny thing is, when I saw the first episode, I thought this show was actually trying to provide some helpful commentary. I mean that I thought that as an indie company, it was trying to provide some social commentary about the value of a life, the potential for evil in a greedy company like J.C. Jensen. This episode doesn't really have anything to say, and I don't think that every show or movie needs to have social commentary. Sometimes it can just be a show or a movie. But when the first episode kind of does, and the second episode and the ones after it don't, I don't know, for me it feels kind of like a betrayal. And I think that's everything I have to say about this episode. Oh wait!
Actually, there is one thing.
It's pretty simple. It's Khan. Khan's a good character. Which is funny because one of the worst things about this episode is the characters, but it also contains my favorite single episode character arc in the whole show. Oh yeah, a lot of people in my last video were saying that there are plenty of ways to make a good character arc in one day, which is something I said couldn't happen in my first video. And I have to say, you're right. You are completely right. I have no idea what I was yapping about there. But back to Khan. In this episode, he confronts his actions from the first episode at the conference. He's clearly in denial, but you can also tell that he feels incredibly guilty for leaving his own daughter for dead. Once Uzi realizes how much her dad means to her after being tricked into thinking he was ripped apart without the two of them ever being able to make amends, she gives Khan a really big hug the next time she sees her, and Khan gives in and hugs her back. It's a good start to a really good character arc that I wish they had developed more in the newer episodes. Khan also spots En running away while hugging Uzi, but doesn't say anything because he's starting to trust En. The two of them were living together for who knows how long. Okay, now that's really everything I have to say. Out of 17, I'd rate this episode a 9. Okay, finally, I'm done. And the video was longer than the actual episode. So yeah, I think I'm done with this series. Unless you guys can get this video to 10 billion likes, because the next episode, I actually kind of like. So subscribe if you enjoyed, and if you don't, you're not invited to my birthday party. You should subscribe right now. You should subscribe right now. You should subscribe right now. You should subscribe right now.